Hello everyone, this is attorney Corey Gallien with Gallien Law Firm, and as promised I'm doing my live expungement workshop. And if you can give me a second, I'm just going to make sure that I'm sharing this across my Facebook page as well as my personal page, so just give me 1 second. All right, and so as I said, this is attorney Corey Gallien. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I have been licensed to practice in the state of Louisiana for 13 years now. I'm giving this expungement live. I don't currently practice criminal law, but I know that there are a lot of people out there who need to learn more about the expungement process and how it works. So this is me giving you information, hoping that it helps you all. So let me tell you more about myself. Again, I've been practicing for 13 years now. During my career, I clerked for 2 judges, Judge Alonzo Harris in the 27th Judicial District that was right out of law school, had a great experience, and also for the Honorable Judge Jules Edwards, who has recently passed, and it was just such a tragic loss. And working for him is part of what inspired me to put on this workshop. As you know, Gallien Law recently participated in the Judge Jules Edwards Community Reentry Resource Fair. And as part of my presentation there, I promised to go live and give more information about a workshop. So that's what I'm doing today. During my 13 years as an attorney, I have done criminal work before throughout my career. I also did assist other attorneys who primarily practice in criminal law, so I have a lot of experience dealing with criminal law. Surprisingly, though, during my 13 years of practice, I have not handled many expungements or come across many expungements being filed. I've only handled a handful of expungements, besides when I participated in an expungement clinic, which provided free expungements for the community. I believe that the limited amount of expungement experience that I have or come across is directly due to the financial barrier that many people who need expungements have. You know, expungements cost money. Attorneys can charge anywhere from $1,000 up to $5,000 or more for an expungement. And while paying $5,000 for an expungement is likely not feasible for many people, attorneys do need to charge for their time and their efforts, and an expungement requires a lot of effort and time on the attorney's part. It includes filing all the necessary forms, contacting the district attorney's office, the arresting agency, whether that's the sheriff's office or the city police department, the Louisiana State Police Department. It also includes filing the appropriate motions and possibly attending a hearing and arguing in favor of granting the expungement. So again, there's many factors that affect the high cost of an expungement. Those factors include the complexity of the case and your unique situation. If you have multiple offenses that you're seeking to expunge, that's going to cost more than someone seeking to expunge only one conviction. Whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony conviction, that also matters and affects the cost of an expungement. Also, the type of charge that you're seeking to expunge may also affect the cost. Whether that's a DWI, those are very unique and they often require more, work on the attorney's part, so they're going to charge more for that. Also, an attorney's experience and their reputation, that also affects the cost that an attorney charges. If you have an attorney right out of law school, they may charge a little less than someone who's been practicing for 2-3 decades. And additional legal services that you may need, if you're seeking to petition the court about things like gun rights in addition to your expungement, that may also affect the total cost that you're going to have to pay for an attorney. Different courts and jurisdictions may also affect you. You know, a big city like New Orleans, the cost that you're looking at paying may be more than someone looking to get an expungement for a small, you know, town such as like Opelousas, and you're petitioning St. Landry Parish District Attorney. The time-intensive, you know, nature of representing you during expungement. Some expungements may be fairly quick, and some may be fairly lengthy. You know, if your conviction was set aside, or if you have an arrest where it didn't result in a conviction, you can get an immediate expungement. That might be more cost effective than someone looking to expunge something where they have to wait a certain amount of time, or, you know, get the consent of multiple agencies. So that all affects the cost of an expungement. So the purpose of this workshop is to empower my participants to have knowledge about the expungement laws and process in Louisiana. During this workshop, you will learn about the different types of expungements, felony expungements, misdemeanor expungements. I'm going to cover all of that during this workshop. You're also going to learn about the eligibility criteria for each of those expungements. And I'm going to address frequently asked questions and common pitfalls, things you need to try to avoid when applying for an expungement. I do want to give you this disclaimer that attending this workshop is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute legal advice. It doesn't form an attorney-client relationship. So I may answer questions, but that does not establish an attorney-client relationship with Gallien Law or with myself, Attorney Corey Gallien. If you need advice tailored to your specific circumstance, I do recommend that you contact a licensed lawyer in Louisiana to help you. Also, this workshop is not meant to give you every single step by step that you need to complete your expungement. It's more so to give you an overview of the process and to help you feel more informed and empowered about the expungements, and help you determine whether you should consult an attorney or whether you may be able to handle this on your own. I do want to say that as a licensed attorney, it's going to always be my opinion that it's best for you if you can afford an attorney or make payment plans. You know, some attorneys may accept payment plans to represent you. So if you can afford that, it's always best to hire a licensed, competent attorney to assist you in any legal proceeding, and particularly in these expungements. However, if you're not able to afford an attorney, I don't want you to feel like you're just closed off from pursuing an expungement. You're always welcome to try to learn more and find out how you can apply for an expungement on your own behalf. So I want to help you understand the expungement process in Louisiana. What is an expungement? An expungement is the legal process of sealing or removing certain criminal records from public access. In Louisiana, an expunged record will not appear in most background checks, but these records may be accessible to law enforcement or other government agencies like the military. They're going to have access to these records even after they're expunged. I also want to discuss why expunging your record may be important. There's many reasons why obtaining an expungement may be important. It can improve your employment opportunities. You know, when you apply for a job, employers are often going to conduct background checks as well as ask questions about your criminal history. A criminal record, or, you know, whether that's an arrest or a conviction, both of those may limit your job prospects, even for qualified candidates. So if you want to have career growth, clearing your record may open the door to higher paying jobs or to allow you to enter a licensed profession like healthcare, education, or law enforcement. It also can increase your access to housing, rental applications. You know, landlords will ask questions about your criminal background, and they may deny housing to individuals with a criminal record. Obtaining an expungement may also give you access to home ownership, because an expungement can simplify the process in obtaining the necessary home loans that you need. It can also expand your educational opportunities. Whether you want to do, higher education, you're going to need financial assistance, and financial aid can also require you to disclose your criminal records, and you may be disqualified from federal financial aid programs with a criminal record. An expungement can also help you avoid barriers to admission to these higher educational institutions, like a four-year institution or even a community college. Obtaining an expungement may also reduce the social stigma associated with having a criminal record. It can give you peace of mind, help you feel less judged or discriminated against in social or professional settings. Having expungement may also help you with your reputation. It allows people to move forward in life without the constant shadow of having a criminal record in your past. And it'll allow you not to dwell on your past mistakes. Obtaining an expungement may also improve your personal relationships, It can restore or increase the positive dynamics in your family, can reduce custody disputes, and it can also streamline the adoption process. Obtaining an expungement may also help you with your own personal growth. So if for no other reason but to feel like you've grown and matured, that's a good reason to obtain an expungement. There are also other legal benefits to obtaining an expungement. If you obtain an expungement, your criminal records may not be used against you in court. So a lot of times, particularly I'm a personal injury attorney, when you're involved in a personal injury accident, these insurance companies will look at your criminal record and they will try to introduce that into court. So obtaining an expungement may help keep those records out of court. It's not always a guarantee, but it's certainly a good step toward preventing disclosure in court. Again, it limits the access that the public has to your criminal history. It provides privacy, from the general public. So I'm always going to recommend that you obtain an expungement if you have a criminal arrest or conviction. It is a crucial step toward rebuilding your life and to, achieving the dreams that you want. So, as we move forward into this new year, think about if you need an expungement, you're here, you're in the right place. So next, I want to go into the different types of expungements and the eligibility criteria for those types of expungements. The first type of expungement is when you have an arrest that does not result in a conviction. So this means you may have been, stopped, a traffic stop, and that led to an arrest. But ultimately, the district attorney did not pursue those charges, or they didn't result in a conviction. They ended up dismissing those charges. So if your charges were dismissed, refused, or not prosecuted, you may be eligible for this type of expungement. The benefit for this type of expungement is that there's no waiting period if the charges were dismissed or not prosecuted, or resulted in an acquittal otherwise. What form do you need when you have an arrest that did not result in a conviction? You do need a motion for expungement form, and you can find these forms in the Louisiana Code of Criminal Procedure, Article 989. So the Code of Criminal Procedure, it's found on the Louisiana Legislature's website. I did print out a copy of it for you so you can see it. So if you look here, it's a standard form called Motion for Expungement, and includes some checklists and everything. So this form is needed for several of the different types of expungements, and you have to go through the forms and check off the appropriate boxes. So again, I did want to show you that. However, in addition to that standard motion for expungement form, you will need some additional requirements for this type of expungement. You will need a certification from the clerk of court in whatever district you're applying for to certify that the case was dismissed or the charges were not filed or otherwise it resulted in an acquittal. You will also need a certificate from the district attorney and or the arresting agency indicating the case status. Again, confirming that it was not resulting in a conviction. So the key takeaway for those types of expungements is that individuals in this category will often qualify for an immediate expungement. And that's much more quickly than someone who has an expungement that resulted in a conviction. The next type of expungement I want to talk about is expungements of misdemeanor convictions. And this applies if you were convicted of a misdemeanor offense. The waiting period for these type of expungements are typically going to be 5 years after the completion of your sentence, as long as there's no new conviction during this period. And the required form is also going to be this general motion for expungement form found in the Louisiana Code of Criminal Procedure, Article 989. There's going to be some misdemeanor convictions that are governed by Article 894 of the Code of Criminal Procedure, where that is when a conviction is suspended and deferred under Article 894 and an individual is placed on unsupervised or supervised probation. Once their probation is completed, they can fill out an expungement form that's contained in Article 987. That's not this form I showed you. It's a completely separate form, also found on the Louisiana Legislature's website. And it's a motion to set aside conviction and dismiss prosecution, and a rule to show cause, and the order of dismissal form. For these forms, for these convictions where they were suspended and deferred, there's also no waiting period. So that's a benefit if your sentence was under Article 894. But if your misdemeanor conviction was not under Article 894 and you were sentenced, it's typically going to be a 5-year waiting period. Another separate distinction is for first-time marijuana offenses. They can apply for an expungement under Article 998. And that article has benefits because it's also going to be a streamlined and a simpler process. Also, you may be dealing with lower fees. So it's beneficial if you're a first-time marijuana conviction. If you have that, you should look at Article 998 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. I do want to state that there are some exceptions where a misdemeanor conviction is not eligible for an expungement. And that's going to be when you have like domestic abuse, battery. Those are not eligible for expungement. So the next type of conviction that I want to talk about, or expungement, should I say, is felony convictions. It applies when you have a felony conviction that you're seeking to expunge. The waiting period for a felony conviction is 10 years, not the 5 years for a misdemeanor conviction. The required form is also going to be the standard form found in Article 989. You would just check, it's the second page where it asks, felony conviction. You're going to make sure that you check the right boxes. You see how it has, if you have a misdemeanor conviction or a felony conviction. But like the misdemeanor convictions, some felony convictions are suspended and deferred, but they're going to be deferred under Article 893. And an individual will be placed on supervised probation. Once their supervised probation is complete, they can then fill out the form contained in Article 987 to set aside that conviction and dismiss prosecution. So for these felony convictions that are set aside under Article 893, there is no waiting period. So that's a benefit if you were sentenced under Article 893. However, you need to know that there's limitations under those sentences under Article 893. You can only get a dismissal and a set-aside conviction twice for any one person. So you can't continue to have felony convictions and seek to be placed on suspended and deferred sentence and think that you'll get that granted toward the end. It's only limited to 2 times, so be careful there. Another exception for felony convictions is crimes of violence. That includes sex offenses requiring registration and certain other offenses. They cannot be expunged. Again, any domestic abuse battery offense that cannot be expunged, even for felony convictions. So as I discussed previously, certain pretrial diversion and deferred adjudications, particularly under Article 893 and 894, those are different than your standard misdemeanor and felony convictions. Typically, there's no waiting period for those. So there are benefits to getting a pretrial diversion or a deferred adjudication. The next distinction and type of expungement I want to talk about is DWI convictions. It applies for people who have been arrested or convicted of a driving while intoxicated offense. For those, you have to wait 10 years from the completion of your sentence with no additional DWI offenses in that time. So even if 10 years passed and you had multiple DWI convictions, the subsequent DWI convictions would prevent you from getting your record expunged. So be careful there. DWIs, they have special rules. They also have an extra fee, which I'm going to cover when I talk about the fees associated with expungements. So because DWI expungements are more complex than your regular expungements, you may want to consider consulting and retaining an attorney to represent you if you're seeking to obtain an expungement of a DWI arrest or conviction. Next, we're going to talk about juvenile records. I'm not going to go into them in detail right now because I will address them later. But juvenile records are different from the adult records, whether that's a misdemeanor arrest or conviction or a felony arrest or conviction. And then lastly, another type of expungement to consider is expungements for charges that were not prosecuted due to time limits. So in Louisiana, the district attorneys have a certain time to prosecute you. And if your arrest did not result in prosecution within that time limit, then the case cannot be prosecuted. You can then seek an immediate expungement after that time limit has expired. The form you would look at is also going to be the standard Article 989 form that I talked about. You would just check the appropriate box. Again, arrest did not result in conviction and time expired for prosecution. So you want to make sure you are checking off the appropriate box. You can look at the Louisiana laws for expungements by starting at the Code of Criminal Procedure, Article 986. It talks about the forms necessary for an expungement, and those and the subsequent statutes go into the specific forms that you need for an expungement. There are going to be other forms that you're going to need to attach to your main expungement form. Typically, you are going to also have to attach the order of expungement to your motion. So you can't just file the motion. You're also going to need the order so that the judge can sign and grant your expungement. You may also need to include a supplemental form. Those supplemental forms can be found in Article 993 of the Louisiana Code of Criminal Procedure. And those supplemental forms are typically going to be needed when you have multiple charges or convictions, multiple docket numbers that you're seeking to expunge. Additionally, there's also something called an interim expungement. An interim expungement is a temporary order of expungement when there's going to be a pending final order of expungement and you want to get that expungement quickly. These may be needed if someone is seeking to obtain an immediate job and the timeline necessary for a standard expungement will prevent them from obtaining a job. It's an extra step, it's extra cost associated with it. And for those reasons, it may not be necessary or feasible for the average person to pursue an interim order of expungement. But I did want you to know that those interim orders of expungement exist, and you may want to consider them if they're right for you. And there is a separate, code article that deals with the interim expungements. I do believe that maybe, let's see if I can get that specific article for you. That is Article 994 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. So if you're interested in an interim expungement, consult that code article. Next, I want to go into the expungement process and tell you, step by step, as best as I can. Again, this is still a general overview of the expungement process, but here's what you need to do. Basically, you would need to start by gathering the necessary documents that you need. Individuals seeking expungement must collect specific records and certifications and include those in their motion for expungement. This will ensure that the motion is complete and meets the legal requirements necessary to obtain an expungement. So what documents do you typically need for an expungement? You typically need a certified copy of the court records, and you can get that from the clerk of court in the parish that you're seeking your expungement, which will include the arrest record, charging documents, and the final disposition, whether it resulted in a dismissal, a conviction. You also need to contact the arresting agency. Again, that will likely be the Sheriff's Office, City Police Department, or the Louisiana State Police Department, and you obtain a copy of the arrest record, which will show the details of the arrest. There will be a charge to obtain the records. Typically, you will also need a certified background check from the Louisiana State Police. And the Louisiana State Police, they charge about $26 to obtain that background check. So this ensures that you have no disqualifying convictions. It tells the court that you meet the legal requirements for an expungement. You also need to obtain a certification of no pending additional, court proceedings, and you would need that from the clerk of court. The clerk of court can confirm that, as well as you also will need the district attorney's office to verify the case status, whether it's dismissed, not prosecuted, the statute of limitations expire, and whether there's any other pending charges that may prevent you from getting an expungement. You will also need to obtain proof of sentence completion, if that is applicable. So you would need documentation from your probation or parole office showing that you have completed your probation or parole, you've paid your fines, restitutions, or any other requirements. You would need an affidavit of no other convictions, which, would swear that you don't have any disqualifying convictions. You want to call these agencies in advance, confirm the fees, the processing times, and, have a checklist to ensure that you have all the documentation needed to obtain your expungement. Then you will next file the petition for expungement, which is, as I showed you, like this, Typically, it will include the docket number in the top. This is just printed straight from the legislature's website, so it doesn't have the docket number, but you will need this motion specific to your case, which would include the docket number and the caption at the top. You want to tailor the motion to your specific type of expungement, whether that's a misdemeanor or felony conviction or arrest. Again, you're checking all the appropriate boxes, because this standard motion for expungement, it includes almost all of the different type of expungements that you need. So you want to make sure that you are checking off accurate information and not just, checking off something that is not applicable to your unique situation. You want to make sure that all the relevant information is included and that it's accurate. So your name, your date of birth, your address, you want to make sure that your contact information is up to date and accurate as well. The arrest details, you also want to make sure that's included in your motion and it is accurate. You will also need to prepare and attach the order of expungement as we talked about so that the judge can sign that order granting your expungement. That order will direct the agencies and the clerk of court to expunge or seal the records. So again, that's necessary. You need that order in order to finalize your expungement. When you file your expungement, you will have to also pay the filing fees. And there are very specific separate filing fees that must be paid at the time that you file your expungement. The cost typically total about $550, and it's distributed among various agencies. So you're typically going to have to pay $250 to the Louisiana Bureau of Criminal Identification and Information, which is a department of the Louisiana State Police. You will also have to pay $200 to the clerk of court in the parish that you're filing the expungement, $50 to the necessary district attorney's office, and $50 to the arresting agency. Again, the sheriff's office, the city police, or the state police, whatever arresting agency. For DWIs, there's going to be an additional $50 fee payable to the Office of Motor Vehicles. Now, I know that's a lot of money, $550 or more, depending on the location and the type of charge you're seeking to expunge. If cost is a barrier to expungement, you may be able to apply and obtain a fee waiver, but there's certain requirements like you can't have a prior felony conviction, there has to be an acquittal, dismissal, or non-prosecution of the charges. To pursue a fee waiver, you must submit a certificate for fee waiver form to the district attorney's office and get their consent to the waiver in advance. This form can be found at the Louisiana Code of Criminal Procedure, Article 988. So if you need that waiver, go to Article 988 of the Louisiana Code of Criminal Procedure. The fees I discussed are usually non-refundable. So even if your expungement is denied, you will not get a refund of these charges. So you want to make sure you're doing it right the first time. Also, again, different parishes may have different costs. Those costs can total up to $700. And agencies can choose to charge less than the statutory maximum. So at the time of filing the motion, you want to request that these agencies are served with a copy of your expungement: the district attorney's office, the arresting agency, and the Louisiana State Police. Again, you want to double check that all your certifications are there, all the necessary information is there, and that the information is accurate. You also want to keep a copy of everything that you file for your records. So I also want to discuss the court proceedings and the timeline necessary for filing an expungement. After you file an expungement, the expungement request goes through the legal review and potentially it can go to a court hearing. The timeline is typically 60 days from you filing the motion for the agencies like the district attorney's office and the Louisiana State Police to file an objection to your expungement motion. If no objection is filed to your expungement, the judge may grant the expungement without a hearing. They still possibly could order that a hearing be had if no objection is filed, but that is extremely rare. If an objection is raised, a hearing will be scheduled. At the hearing, the judge reviews your motion for expungement and any objections that were raised. So if your motion is set for a hearing, you need to be prepared to present evidence or arguments supporting your case. Be prepared to tell the court the reasons you're seeking the expungement, why you meet the legal requirements for an expungement, as well as be prepared to address any objections that were made. Now the judge will have to make a decision. If the judge grants the expungement, the judge will sign the order of expungement, which would seal your record from public access. If the judge denies your motion, you may be able to correct the deficiency and refile the expungement, depending on the reason for that denial. A denial may also mean that you are ineligible for an expungement. So if you filed an expungement on your own behalf and it was denied the first time, you should strongly consider hiring an attorney to assist you in determining if you're eligible for an expungement and in reapplying for an expungement if you are eligible for an expungement. Now, after the judge signs the expungement, it goes into a record sealing process. So once approved, the clerk of court will then notify the Louisiana State Police, and they'll look at it themselves and see that they're ordered to seal the records. So that also includes the arresting agency. They'll also get a copy of the order and be directed to seal those records. The process of sealing or expunging your records can take several weeks after an order of an expungement is granted. So just because the court grants your expungement does not mean that your record will be sealed immediately. It takes time, so you need to be patient with the process. It could take several weeks. So here's a few frequently asked questions that I get about expungements. One question that I get often is whether an expungement will help an individual regain their right. Got a call. If you missed that, I said in Louisiana. Sorry about that. Thank you for your patience. So, as I was saying, in Louisiana, expungements do not automatically restore your voting rights. However, under Louisiana Revised Statute 18102, voting rights are typically automatically restored for an individual who's been out of prison for 5 years, even if you're on probation or parole. So if 5 years have passed and you've been out of prison for 5 years, then your voting rights may be restored. And this restoration, it's independent of an expungement. So you don't need an expungement. It doesn't affect your voting rights, basically. Another question I get is whether expungements restore a person's right to purchase, own, or carry a weapon, or firearm, should I say. And in Louisiana, expungements alone do not automatically restore gun rights. The gun restoration rights are typically going to be governed by state and federal laws. So in general, if you have a misdemeanor conviction, that will not affect your right to possess a weapon under state or federal laws. There is a major exception for domestic abuse convictions. Even if that's a misdemeanor, your right to possess, own, or purchase a firearm will be affected. So for state laws on gun rights in Louisiana, individuals are typically going to be prohibited from possessing, purchasing, or owning a firearm for a period of 10 years when they have a felony conviction. And that 10 years starts after completion of their sentence, probation, or parole, or suspension of sentence. And after that 10-year period, your gun rights are typically going to be automatically restored under Louisiana law. However, federal laws are different and separate, and you need to be aware of them. Under federal law, an individual with a felony conviction is typically going to be prohibited from owning and possessing a firearm permanently. Expungements possibly can help restore gun rights under federal law if the expungement removes the conviction, if 10 years have passed since completion of sentence, and it was a non-violent and non-sexual offense. So this area of law is still a developing area of law. you should obtain the assistance of an attorney in determining whether you have the right to carry a firearm if you have been arrested and convicted for a felony conviction, because again, it implicates your state and federal laws. Also, in some cases, you may have to petition the court separately, not an expungement, but separately, to restore your firearm rights. So again, it's a distinction from expungements, and you may want to consult an attorney to determine what's best for you. Another question that I get often is about juvenile rights and whether you should expunge juvenile records. So in Louisiana, juvenile records are going to be kept confidential by default. They're generally not accessible to the public. However, they can be viewed by certain entities such as law enforcement, courts, licensing boards, military. Because they're kept confidential by default, obtaining an expungement of the record for a juvenile record, it may not be necessary. You're going to have to make that decision yourself. Juvenile records, they can be eligible for expungement if the arrest did not result in adjudication, if it's misdemeanors or certain non-violent or non-sexual felony convictions. If you need a juvenile record expunged, the form that you need to obtain an expungement can be found at Louisiana Children's Code Article 925. Article 919 of the Children's Code sets forth the procedures necessary to obtain a juvenile expungement. So again, it's a separate process, separate laws, and again, you also may want to consult an attorney if you're considering expunging your juvenile records. But the good news is that for juvenile records, they're going to be confidential by default in Louisiana. So one common mistake that I see people make when seeking an expungement is that I see them incur a new charge or conviction before filing and obtaining your expungement. So new charges and new convictions can and often do affect your ability to obtain an expungement. You should avoid getting into another arrest or conviction when you're trying to seek to expunge your current arrest or conviction. Another common pitfall that I see is people being impatient with the process. They file an expungement and they want that expungement granted and their records sealed immediately. Unfortunately, expungements take time. As I said, it's a process that takes months. Again, you have agencies that have 60 days to object. So just by default, there's typically going to be a timeline necessary that you have to wait. Also, clerk's office, arresting agencies, district attorney's offices, the state police, those are busy agencies. They will not have the time to address your impatience. It's best for you to be aware of the timelines and to wait till those timelines are complete before you follow up with the status of your expungement or requested documentation. So thank y'all so much for just being patient with me as I go through the expungement process. I do want to share that I've created an expungement guide that goes over, what an expungement is, the necessary steps you need to take, and the cost that you need to take. It's 2 pages long, front and back. If you need this expungement guide, please reach out to Gallien Law. You can message us on Facebook. You can email me directly at Corrie, Corrie, at gallienlaw.com. That is GALLIEN law.com. And I will be happy to share this free expungement guide. No strings attached. I prepared it to inform the public about expungement guides. I also don't mind giving you a copy of this outline that I had for this expungement workshop. I want to inform the public about the process and demystify the expungement process. So I'm happy to share. If you have questions, please just reach out and ask me. I also want to give you resources that you may want to consider if you need to obtain an expungement. I would direct you to the official Louisiana legislature website. That's https ://legis.la.gov, and that website has all the Louisiana laws. You're going to need to go to the Code of Criminal Procedure and the relevant articles that I mentioned in this workshop to look at the forms and learn about the process. Another website you're going to want to go to is the Louisiana State Police website. That is lsp.org, so lsp.org. And the State Police website, it has important information about the expungement process, including their cost, but also common mistakes to avoid. So you're going to want to check that out and make sure you're not making those mistakes if you're filling out your own expungement forms. You should also, there's actually many resources that share with you the forms that you need. Again, you can get that on the legislature website, but also I looked at the different clerk's offices, and their websites may contain the necessary expungement forms. I checked out Lafayette's clerk's office to see if I could find the expungement forms. I did not find them there. I can't say definitively that they don't have them, but I didn't find them. But Calcasieu clerk's office, they do have the necessary expungement forms, and you just go and you search it, Calcasieu Clerk of Court expungement forms. It should take you to the website. You click it and it will pop up the necessary form. You kind of fill in the blank. It has the docket number information at the top that you would just fill out, the necessary docket, your case caption, state of Louisiana versus your name, and it's really step by step. You're making sure you're checking off the necessary things. So again, if you need those forms, the Calcasieu clerk's office is a good place to go. Although I don't do criminal law and I don't necessarily do expungements, if you have additional questions after attending this workshop, please feel free to reach out. If I cannot help you, I will direct you to an attorney who is able to or possibly able to help you with an expungement. I can't guarantee that another attorney will be able to help you, but I can try to give you some resources and make sure you know where to go. So again, thank you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I see we don't have many people on right now, and that there's probably going to be a lot of people watching the replay. That's okay. I will try to follow up and look and see if there's comments made after this live has ended, and I'll be happy to answer them if I can. So again, thank you so much for watching and being patient with me as I explain the Louisiana expungement process. I really hope that you got something out of this, and please feel free to give me feedback on what else you would have liked to see in this workshop, or if it did help you. Thank you. You have a good day. Bye-bye.